Okay, Chair, so we're live on YouTube now, okay? Okay, Chairman, the meeting's live.
We're ready to start the meeting?
Yes, we are, Chair.
Yeah. Good afternoon and welcome to East Devon District Council's virtual car parking task and finish forum meeting on the 19th of November 2020. I am your chair, Councillor Colin Brown, and I would like to welcome anyone watching the meeting via the live streaming. All participants here today are taking part remotely, and as well as being live streamed, the meeting is being recorded. So please bear this in mind throughout, and may I remind you to be careful with your language. May I also remind members that the code of conduct applies throughout this meeting. We also reserve the right to remove and disconnect any participant who is disrupting the meeting by whatever means. Please turn any telephone devices off or to silent. As this car parking task and finish forum meeting is dependent on internet connection and a power supply, in the event of a break in the internet connection or power cut, please bear with us while we try to reconnect. After 15 minutes, if we are not able to reconnect, we will consider the meeting adjourned and reconvene at a later date. Please check the committee pages on our website for details. Please make sure all microphones are muted when you're not speaking to avoid any background noise levels. Keep points short and do not repeat points that have already been made, and do not interrupt. If you wish to comment, please raise your electronic blue hand and wait to be called. All councillors have been sent the agenda for today's meeting. Any members of the public who want to view the agenda can do so by visiting our website, www.eastdevon.gov.uk. We will now start the meeting by doing a roll call of committee members here present. Can you please unmute your microphones, and when you hear your name, please confirm by saying present. When you have confirmed you are present, please mute your microphone again.
Okay, so we've got Councillor Brown.
Present.
Councillor Bloxham.
Present.
We've had apologies from Councillor Chapman. Councillor Coleman.
Present.
Councillor Davey.
Present.
Councillor Howe.
Present.
Councillor Ingham.
Present.
Councillor Ranger.
Present.
Councillor Rylance. So Councillor Rylance?
Councillor Rylance has come into the meeting.
Yes.
I think she's on mute.
We'll go on. And Councillor Wibley. So Councillor Rylance, I think you're on mute.
I've only just tuned in, actually. Hello, are you doing the roll call?
Yes.
Yes, I'm present.
Brilliant. Thank you. So we are
Sorry.
for it today, Chairman.
Yes, Councillor Wibley said he might be 10 minutes late. Sorry to interrupt you.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, I can confirm we are correct today. Agenda item 1, public speaking. As I understand it, we have no public speakers. Agenda item 2, minutes of the previous meeting, pages 3 to 6. If anyone has any comments placed on these sets of minutes from the 9th of January 2020, please do so by raising your blue hand. If no blue hands are raised, I will take this as an indication that you all agree to the minutes of the previous meeting. Thank you. The minutes of the previous meeting are agreed. Agenda item 3, apologies.
So I've had apologies from Councillor Maddie Chapman.
Thank you. Agenda item 4, declarations of interest. This will be done by a roll call.
So Councillor Brown,
None.
Councillor Bloxham,
A member of Cranbrook Town Council.
Councillor Coleman,
Member of Exmouth Town Council.
and Councillor Davey,
Member of Exmouth Town Council.
Councillor Howe,
None.
Councillor Ingham,
None.
Councillor Ranger,
None.
and Councillor Rylance.
Member of Broadcliffe Parish Council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And just checking whether we've got Councillor Wibley with us yet. No. Okay,
No.
thank you.
Agenda item 6, confidential exempt items. There are no confidential or exempt items which officers recommend should be dealt with in this way. Matters for decision. Agenda item 7, review of the terms of reference. Andrew Ennis to speak.
Thank you, Chairman. I haven't yet tested my microphone. Am I coming through loud and clear?
Yes. Well, to me anyway.
Okay. So to assist, these are the terms of reference that were agreed by the previous TAFF that met twice back in November 2019 and again in January 2020. Their work was then interrupted by the pandemic, and subsequently the Council's new administration has formed a new scrutiny committee and a new task and finish forum. So I didn't want to assume you would be working to those same terms of reference that your predecessor TAFF was working to. So what's set out for you in section 7 is, in a summary, the fact that I think it's appropriate to bear in mind the car parks have a significant role in terms of asset management, but also in terms of supporting communities. There's also an impact on the local economy for sure. Local authority parking teams are bound by a number of statutory constraints. Probably the most important one you need to bear in mind is we can't simply decide to raise a car parking tariff simply to raise some money. That isn't allowed under civil parking enforcement rules. There has to be some management reason for raising that tariff. I certainly sort of suggested to the previous staff that the climate change emergency was a relevant consideration and one which our car parking policies could for sure help to influence in a positive way or perhaps a negative way. and certainly something I'm suggesting in the topics for discussion, we move up the agenda rather than leave down at this stage. And I think during the first meeting of the TAFF, it was also agreed that we should have a clear remit to consider the equalities and the health and well-being issues that might arise out of any changes of our car parking policies. So they were your predecessor's terms of reference, and you may wish, and I guess, to debate whether they are still correct or whether you wish to change them in some way.
Thank you. I first invite non-members to speak by raising their virtual blue hand. Once non-members have spoken, I will then invite members of the committee to speak. I can see no blue hands. Yes, I can. Right. No, there's no.
Chair.
Oh, and I've got Councillor Paul Hayward.
Thank you, Chair. Really, thank you for hosting today. I'm just going to, if I may, just sit and listen. I've nothing to add at the moment. I'll be just really interested to see what's said. I've obviously read the papers for the meeting. I have my own views on some of the things that have been done and could be done. But I'll be delighted with your agreement just to sit, listen, and then perhaps at the next meeting that's scheduled, put together some thoughts based on what you say today. But as Andrew has so succinctly put, parking is critical to the East Devon way of life. It's vital for our tourism, it's vital for our businesses, for our economy, but also for our finances. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, there's no other non-members wanted. No other non-members wanted to speak. Oh, wait a minute. Before I go on to Councillor Mike Howe, who's a member, Marianne Rickson would like to say something.
Well, I'm just referring back to the minutes in 9th of January 2020, because it says in point 22, it was noted members had made comments regarding Newton Pot, Broadcliff, Sidbury and Jarvis Close car parks, that all these car parks had a great community benefit. Well, I think I spoke quite at length at the meeting when I think everybody wanted to speak, and I pointed out that Temple Street in Sidford and also the car park in Church Street were convenience stores, and that they also had great community benefit. And I'm, I was a little surprised that they've not been included in these minutes.
I've got something about those, the Temple Street car park, which is offers short, free of charge parking and reserved parking space on a short-term lease there, isn't there?
Yes, this is true, but also the spaces have been reduced enormously. I think they're now down to just 11, and there are 3 businesses there which rely on convenience shopping. One is the pet food shop. It also does heavy bags of cat litter and everything. There's a vet's nearby, and if you need to carry your animals, you want a car park nearby. Plus there is a laundry business, again for the same reason, carrying bags of heavy laundry.
All right, thank you. We'll bear that in mind. Thank you. Right, we go to members now. The first member who wants to speak is Councillor Mike Howe.
Thank you, Chair. And it's more of a technicality, because obviously at our last meeting, Councillor Alan Dent was chair after this TAFF had chosen the chair. Obviously, we've lost Councillor Alan Dent. Surely our first order of business should be appointing a chair. And if that is the case, I'd like to propose Councillor Colin Brown as chair, or have I inadvertently missed something because I was drunk at some point? Inobtrusively, if you get my meaning. But nevertheless, no. TAFF's first order of business surely should be to elect a chair.
Well,
it's not head of scrutiny's job to chair TAFF's.
Right. Well, if that's what the committee wants, that we can do that if that's what the committee requests.
I'm more than happy to propose you, sir, but obviously,
Thank you.
as a formality, I just want to make sure we do things right.
Yeah. Well, committee, is there any other person?
Well, I'm happy to second if it's necessary as a formality. Can any of the officers comment on that, whether we need to elect a new chair?
My understanding was that the chairs were appointed at the council meeting.
Was it for TAFs?
Is that correct? I would need to go back and check.
Yeah. Likewise, I'd understood the same, that the chair was going to be Colin Brown and vice chair Val Ranger.
That's all right. If I missed it, I'm more than happy. But normally we don't set chairs of TAFs. That's all. But I'm quite happy either way.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. Is everybody happy with me being chair? Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I've got to find me little.
Chair, Councillor Ollie Davey.
Ollie Davey, yeah. Sorry, I couldn't find my buttons. Sorry.
Right.
Thanks, Colin. Yeah, it's an unusual terms of reference in some ways. Having sat on a few TAFs and committees and looked at terms of reference, there's a surprising number of questions in this one, which I think is good because it's obviously gives us pointers as to what we need to consider. I notice under asset management it starts to consider, and under communities it's to consider, but under economy there's nothing, and under statutory there's nothing, and it's just again perhaps a technicality, but do we need something under economy to say what we need to be considering there rather than just a heading that says reasonable tariffs, whatever that means? I'm just wondering if they need a little bit of a redraft.
Well, we can go through things piecemeal as we get further into the meeting. Yeah, we've got a few items of agenda here. I mean, there's a number of things we can take into consideration for the car parking, with the charges and the way it should be dealt with and what we can do with the car parks. But we'll bring all those things up a bit later on, if that's all right. I mean, it's going to be a long meeting anyway because there's so much to discuss.
Yeah, I don't want to take up valuable time on technicalities like this. It's fine as a working document.
Yeah, thank you.
Chair, I apologise, Andrew. I can't make my blue hand work. May I just add something?
Yep.
Just to say, I think the wording in those terms of reference are the original discussion document I brought to the original TAFF, so I don't think they've been framed in terms of specific terms of reference. They're kind of as I set them out with a number of questions posed. If we move on to the next item, perhaps the discussion document might help the TAFF focus on the work that needs to be done in the time available, is all I would add.
Thank you. Councillor Ingham.
Thank you, Chair. The terms of reference, they're a nice idea back along. Last October, we were in the comfortable position of being able to be moderately flippant with the idea of, do we need to raise money for funding our council's activities? And I remember those two meetings, November and January, where there was a lot of debate about how car park charges weren't going to change. I have to say, since March, this is a different world. Yeah, I believe we haven't got any choice. I think that I wouldn't say with those terms of reference, you've got to wipe the slate clean. but you've got to be prepared to reject some of them because of the circumstance that we're now in comparison to this time last year. It's radically different. And so I think there's a number of things, like the idea that some parishes could opt out of contributing to the car park finances. I think that's no longer viable, especially if we're talking about the largest village in East Devon that has to contribute. You can't have everyone else contributing and others not. I don't think that's right. And because it's such a long time since there's been an increase, I'd have thought you've got to go for across the board increase to be fair, wherever possible, with those ones that are already charging. Let's say something like 10% increase, and you've got to bring in quite a few more of the smaller car parks so that it's seen to be fair to all of the communities. I noted the email sent out by Councillor Hayward, quite a good idea. If you look at all the things that cost us money and the very, very few income streams we have, car parking's one, and so supporting heirs as a way of raising funds is a very good idea. I'd have thought, be crazy not to consider that. And you might want to say, well, whatever our base rate increase is, perhaps we should say 5%, add an extra 5% or an extra 10%, and all of that money goes to our climate emergency agenda and funding that. So, you know, if we're bringing in, say, 300,000, let's make that an extra 200,000 so we can do more to protect the planet. And who better to fund that than people still driving cars? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. There's a number of things going to come up later on with regards to raising money for car parking and etc. Councillor Ranger.
Thank you. Sorry, I thought we were still discussing the terms of reference, so that's what I'm addressing. I think, I mean, all of these things, most of these things are still appropriate, but I think when we were meeting last time, when we scheduled the meetings out, it was going to take months and months and months to cover all of these items. So I had thought that we were trying to streamline a little bit and bring forward up the agenda the climate change emergency. I thought that was area 1. Then I thought asset management was area 2, principally looking at asking the towns and villages who hadn't taken on their car parks if they would like to do so, so to immediately offset costs that we've got. And then also we were, I think we were going to focus on the new opportunities that we've got building on from the Exmouth car parking TAFF for camper vans and those sorts of areas that we haven't really properly addressed previously, because I think we've got to focus down a little bit, especially if we are considering any changes of funding for next year. If we cover all of these things on this terms of reference, I think we're not going to be in time. So I'm not saying that we should be raising charges, but where we can get other income streams, we need to make that decision and get it to full council in good time.
Yes, I mean, that's the idea of it. We've got this meeting, we've got a meeting on Thursday of next week, and we want to try and get all the ideas in so that we can raise the money or get a good income source from the assets that we've got. Right, that's all the speakers on that one. Well, item 7. I've lost my paperwork here. To see topics of discussion for item 8. Committee. Would anyone like to speak on this? To receive a report from the Service Lead, Environment, Health and Car Parks, Mr. Andrew Ennis. The order of topics will follow from the list on the agenda focusing to start the climate change emergency before moving into asset management and review generation. Each item will be dealt with separately or discussed separately. Thank you, Andrea. No.
Sorry, I'm back. I was having trouble turning off mute, and my computer went very slow. I thought it was going to crash, but I'm still with you, I hope.
Yep.
Good. Okay. So, Chair, would you like me to take you through the discussion paper, sort of section by section, so we can pause and debate each one as we go?
Yes, please.
Okay. So I'll move quite quickly through the introduction because that was scene setting, and I think probably most people in the virtual meeting are aware, but a few facts probably never do any harm. So in terms of what we're looking at, we currently manage 57 public car parks across East Devon, and just in terms of a caveat, there are a number of other parking areas around that we do own, but I don't manage them. There are car parks associated with playing fields, nature reserves, quite a few areas on our housing estates, council depots, industrial estates, and so on. They're currently all out of scope. I don't manage them. They're managed individually. So if the TAFF feel they want to go back to any of those, we need to do something else and invite other people in there. They're not part of my remit. So of the 57 car parks that the car parks team look after, 45 of those are currently operated on a pay and display tariff. And I've singled out Mill Street car park in Sidmouth because although it is on a pay and display tariff, it also offers reserved car parking spaces, which generate a significant revenue income for the council. So of the remaining 12 sites, also in Sidmouth Town Centre is the Homedale site and the Helena Place site in Exmouth, both of which are run on the basis of exclusive reserved parking on short leases that customers pay for a reserved bay. They pay quite a lot of money for it, and they have exclusive use of those parking bays. Currently, Exmouth Lorry Park isn't on a pay and display tariff. It's been closed for over a year now. It's been set aside for the construction compound for the Exmouth Tidal Defence contract works. That's part of this council's contribution to that scheme. And one of the matters I'd like the TAFF to turn to is the future of that car park at some stage. There's a suggestion that we could possibly develop it as a purpose designed and constructed motorhome and camper van facility going forwards, rather than revert it to the lorry park, which I'm suggesting is perhaps less needed and has been done without quite nicely for the last year. Third on my list of the remaining 12 sites was Upper Station Car Park in Budleigh Salterton. It doesn't operate on a pay and display tariff, but in my view it could. It's been subject to a lease to Budleigh Salterton Town Council for a number of years. They pay £500 per annum for that lease, and then they make it available to the public at no charge. Blackmore Gardens in Sidmouth has a car park that I think is currently signed as belonging to the NHS. It's meant to serve the Sidmouth Library and the Sidmouth Health Centre, not to be for public use. For historical reasons, both elements used to be with the County Council. They're now combined, and the lease goes to NHS Property Services for just £126 a year. They don't manage it. They don't manage it for exclusive use of the health centre, and my suggestion is we could quite profitably and usefully take that car park back and manage it properly for the benefit of the health centre and for a small operating profit for the council as well. Seaton Jurassic Coach Park, some of you may remember, was subject to a request last year from Seaton members that we make that coach parking available free of charge for the town for to assist Seaton to become a coach-friendly town designation. We did that, and that continues. So that's another area that the TAFF might want to consider. We've heard about Temple Street car park just now from the ward councillor. For sure, it is supporting the community. What she says is true, but it's one where we have a small amount of income from the reserve parking bays, and it is correct that we did increase the number of reserve parking bays in that car park because we had a significant waiting list of residents who wanted to lease them from us, and that did result in a smaller number of the free of charge spaces that are there to support the community shops and other businesses. But there is an opportunity there to do something with Temple Street because it's not one that's currently managed on our usual pay and display format. The remaining 5, which I've listed there, the Village Car Park in Broadclist, Brook Road Car Park in Budley Salterton, Jarvis Close Car Park in Littleham, School Lane, that should say not Land, I apologise for typing error, in Newton Popperford, and the small car park in Sidbury, all continue to offer public parking free of charge, but it's inevitable, therefore, that the East Devon District Council does incur a net cost in maintaining and operating those car parks, including, I think, in all cases, an amount of business rates that are payable on them. So that's the introduction. Does anyone want to come back on the introduction before we move on to the climate emergency business?
We're just about, are we to lose a car park at Silver Street in Honiton, which we earn quite a good income from?
I wasn't aware of that, Chair.
Well, there's a planning application in for it at, or coming in from Churchill's with regards to putting their type of properties on there, which did belong to East Devon, but I think we gave up our control over it.
Chair, that is news to me. As far as I know, we still own and manage Silver Street car park, but I can go back and make some further inquiries.
Yeah. Which one is it? Yeah, because there is a planning application being discussed for one of those, isn't there? One of our car parks.
I haven't been consulted, Chair.
Yeah, one that we rent. So. And you know, on assets and that, I mean, I think we should look at getting someone to look after some of our car parks, like the one that we sold down, or didn't sell. We supplied a lease on down at Ottery, where we get a return on that in excess of what we would have got if we used it as a car park. Is that right?
So Chair, yes, Chair, I do know about the car park. It was our Hine Street car park in Ottery St Mary. It worked very well with the new Sainsbury's development. So the deal that was done allowed Sainsbury's to manage it as the car park for their store, and in return, this council gets an annual lease that's currently about £63,000, I think, per annum, which, as you say, is now a little bit more than we used to make from the car parking revenue at that car park a few years ago, and that lease cost is index linked and only in an upwards direction, which is quite a useful deal. So yes, we don't do any work for it, and we get a revenue income of currently £63,000 from it. And that is true. But Silver Street car park in Honiton, I've no knowledge of this. I've not been consulted in any way, so I will need to go back and make further inquiries. And I can.
It's the one where the animal market was, isn't it?
I know the car park. Yes, I just haven't been consulted on selling it or developing it.
All right.
We still manage it.
Yeah. Committee, do we want to go into discussion on this one? What's been said? Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just come in briefly on a couple of the car parks that I'm familiar with. The Exmouth Lorry Park, as Andrew's rightly said, doesn't seem to be greatly missed, and it's always been pretty underused. It has had some use as a coach park for some of the language schools in Exmouth, and it might need to be returned to that. I mean, obviously the current pandemic has limited those activities. But I also very much like the idea of using it as a camper van site. I think we certainly need those somewhere, and one that's close to the town centre would certainly bring an economic boost, I think. The Budleigh Salterton car park I also know very well. I use it regularly. It's an astonishingly low cost to Budleigh Salterton Town Council, £10 a week to provide free parking. And I would kind of support possibly bringing that back within our remit, or if that's not possible, raising the amount that we lease it for. And finally, the Jarvis Close one, I know that one quite well too, although I don't particularly use it. I often cycle past it, but it is handy for a small parade of shops there. And it is quite a small car park. It's pretty busy. It gets a lot of in and out use, short-term parking. So possibly that one we should leave alone. But I think we need to look at staggered types of charging, you know, a 50p short stay car park or something like that. And sort of consider other ways of charging for our car parks.
Right. Councillor Ranger.
Thank you. I was just wondering if it would be more sort of expeditious. I'm sure we've all read this report. If maybe when the sections come up, we could just get straight into asking questions on it, because it is given us a fair amount of detail. So I've got a few questions. So I had a discussion with Simon. We exchanged some information previously, Simon Davey, on whether we were paying business rates on all car parks, and then when we pay those business, exactly how does that work? Is it a budget transfer that we're paying into one department and paying out into another, or are we paying those rates to central government? How is that working, so that we're all clear about that? The NHS, have they been approached about the car park in Blackmore Gardens in Sidmouth? Because I know we talked about that last year. And my other question to Andrew Ennis is if he could just clarify the difference between the council raising income by raising car parking fees and being in breach of what they're allowed to do, and the council raising fees. How are we justifying, when we come to the raising of fees, how are we justifying that, bearing in mind that Andrew has just said the council cannot just raise fees to boost their income? In other words, use it as a cash cow. So that I'm unclear about that. So it's quite a few questions. Question for Simon, question for Andrew on leases and whether anybody has been approached about those yet. And just an explanation about the difference between raising money just because we want some money and we can get it from car parking, and a legitimate reason for doing so. Also, just lastly, asset transfers. Are we, before we start talking about charging in these free car parks, are we in the first instance going to ask the local towns and parish councils if they want to take them over?
Chair, can I come in and answer some of those?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. So, sorry, I think I understood the question against the Ranger in terms of business rates. So it's like any, I'll say what I'll say and tell me whether that answers your question or not, and I can always cover off anything else I need to. But basically, like anything else the council owns, it pays business rates on, like any other business, like any other local authority. So that shouldn't get confused with the point in terms of Our income, on the other hand, also comes from business rates, but you should really separate the two. So like any business, we pay business rates and we pay business rates on car parks, and you've done some great work analysing that for us. So we pay business rates. In effect, it comes out of the general fund pot, if you like, and then we pay into a business rates collection fund any rates that we owe. Within that collection fund business rate pot, all other money from business rates that we collect in terms of our function as administering and collection of business rates goes into that pot. And then that pot is redistributed based on what's called business rate retention scheme. So the government take 50%, East Devon gets 40%, the Fire get 1%, and Devon County Council get 9% of that. But all those numbers are added up, and the government take different, although that's the straightforward slice of the business rate pot, the collection fund pot, there are some added complications if you go over your base and all sorts of things. But basically paying rates is one side, and you pay that like any other business, and then income is collected from all businesses, including East Devon District Council's money, and is distributed on a different formula. Does that answer your question, Councillor?
Yes, thank you. Did we establish if we're paying business rates on all the car parks? Do you remember the discrepancy?
Yeah, there were a couple. Yep, I was happy that we're paying rates where we should do. There was some that we reported to the valuation office whereby, so for example, you highlighted to us the Thelma Holbert car park in Honiton, whereas we've got that, we're sure under the main car park valuation, but we're just checking on a couple of those that you've highlighted for us, just to make sure we got them right. But what it has highlighted, slightly outside the purpose of this TAFF, is a need to make sure our business rates team talks to all our services in the authority to make sure our own records are up to date in various areas. So it was helpful from that point of view. Thank you. If that's that one, if I come on to car park income, Andrew will probably cover it off as well, but it is an interesting, Andrew's right in terms of legislation about car parks not being seen just as an income earner, if you like, but car parks are a massive income earner, particularly to district councils and city councils. There's a slightly different legislation between a county council that deals with on-street parking and legislation regarding off-street parking. So with on-street parking, it's clear that all income that you collect on-street parking needs to go towards transportation costs. Now you can cast that quite wide. That could be marking out car park spaces, your traffic wardens, but it could be initiatives, it could be all sorts of things. So that definition could be quite wide. That legislation doesn't affect us. That would be Devon County Council. In terms of car parks, off-street parking, no local authority that I'm aware of has actually been challenged in terms of how much income it's been made, but it is a legitimate question. So when we just make sure that we cover ourselves, and we will any reports that are written about any increases in car park charges, it's just making sure that other factors are brought into consideration. So it's whether car parks are completely full and we're trying to encourage a better turnover of car parks for the local economy, or we're trying to attract people to certain car parks rather than others. It's not just let's up it by 10% because that brings in £60,000 and we're forgetting all the other implications. It's just making sure you take it in the round, I think I'm saying.
Thank you.
The points, the reason I sort of wanted to dial into this meeting, and I'll take the opportunity to say now if that's okay, car park income is extremely important to the finances of East Devon District Council. We haven't increased our car park charges, and I'm sure Andrew's highlighted this, since 2010. So we haven't even applied inflation increases to our charges over those years. It's in the order of about 3.5 million total charges. And if you imagine that funds a significant element of our services. In terms of our medium-term financial gap, we haven't, in terms of income generation, car parks is the top one, and to not have looked at that income for all those years in terms of any increase, we've played with different tariffs, but in terms of increasing, that is an area that I would strongly recommend in terms of trying to balance our books we look at. Now, I think Andrew's proposed in previous reports ways that we can do that by perhaps still helping local residents, but charging those visitors who also cost us in various other areas as well, just to try and help balance our books going forward. But I'm sure I'll come back on that if there are other questions as we go through the meeting.
Thank you. Does that answer your questions, Val?
I think there was some for Andrew as well.
Yeah.
Chair.
Yeah. Okay. Can I come back, Chair?
Yeah.
Okay. May I just pick up just one comment made by I think it was Councillor Davey, just on the question of the coach park in Exmouth. We have closed the lorry park, but the coach park remains open, Councillor Davey. That is still open for business. The lorry park was occasionally used as a coach park overflow, so that's not available. We haven't, and we are not contemplating closing the coach park. That's still very much in business. So I just wanted to correct that point for anyone who was listening intently. Coming back to Councillor Ranger's points, perhaps picking up on the income that Simon has already answered. The only extra bit I would say is we have to be very aware of the consequences of any increase in our car parking tariffs on the way motorists might choose to behave, particularly if it results in on-street congestion or on-street parking stress. So we've got to consult with the police and with the county council as the highway authority every time we change something. So the general principle would be that the off-street car parking would be for longer term car parking that should be a little bit cheaper and certainly longer term than the options available on street. So that is one of the constraints we've got to bear in mind. We can't suddenly start to charge £10 an hour when you can park all day on street for nothing, because everyone would park on street instead. So that probably is the major constraint we've got to think about when we set our tariffs. And then there has to be a formal consultation process where either the police or the county council could object if we are going too far. As Simon said, I can't think of any local authorities that have been challenged through the courts for inappropriate parking charges, but the media does have a field day every year when they publish figures. So it is never easy to increase charges, but we haven't done so for a long time. I think there is an opportunity to have a look at that this year for sure. Councillor Ranger, yes, we absolutely have talked to NHS Property Services. Dialogue's been ongoing and extremely slow for a while. We have paused through the pandemic, but we will pick it up with them again. They seem to have no interest in managing Blackmore Gardens car park. So there was quite a lot of inertia when we talked to them before. And I do intend to push that again if members are of the mind that we should bring it into use as a public pay and display car park. It does mean forcing them to either comply with the terms of their lease or to give it up. However, it's not going to be a straightforward process. Just trying to read my own writing on the final point. Okay, that was Simon. I already answered that on the business rates, wasn't it? So unless there's anything else, I'll pass back to the chair.
Thank you. I see Councillor Paul Hayward's got his hand raised. He's not a member of this committee. Is it something relevant to what we're discussing at the moment, Councillor Hayward?
Thank you, Chair. I did send a message to the meeting organiser, just wondering if I could just interject on that point you raised about the car park, which purportedly is being sold for development or used for development. It was really, thank you for that information. I'm not aware of it through my asset management role, and neither, it seems, is Andrew. So I'll be contacting Mr. Childs and seeing what perhaps has been happened in the past. This committee will be aware, or this forum will be aware, of other arrangements that have gone in times gone by in other towns that sometimes have been lost in the depths of time, and the actual ownership of the car park, whilst it might appear on the surface to be East Devon, actually rests with a third party, often a commercial body. So thank you for that tip-off, Chair, and I'll take that forward with Mr. Child and see how the land lies. Thank you.
Yeah, well, you've only got to look at planning application 20/2410.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, you know, a planning application, you don't have to own the land to put a planning application in. You just have to,
Yeah,
submit it.
East Devon don't own the land.
Thank you.
Councillor Mike Howell.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's an interesting meeting so far, and does somewhat cast us back to starting again, doesn't it? I don't fully agree with what Councillor Ingham said originally, but I do also at the same time have a great mindfulness that all of our car parks should be cost neutral at the very least, i.e. the ones that are currently free and we're paying business rates for, maintenance for and everything else, we either should look to dispose of to parish and town councils, saving the cost, or we need to recoup at least the maintenance and the business rates from in a way of limited, cheapish charging. But we cannot go on subsidising car owners, etc., in the way that we have been, particularly on these that are currently free car parks. So I do think we need to somehow go back round, not quite car park by car park, because we were doing that before, but certainly on these free car parks, how we manage that, what the costs are, and how we can possibly either gift them to the parish councils if the parish councils want them for free, or at the very least put in charging that covers our costs. Because I do believe, and I fully agree with Mr. Davey there, that we do need to keep up with it and keep going, shall we say, and get going. So I just think one way or another we need to go back over these free car parks and decide what we believe should be the outcome for them, whether we need to start those discussions with those parish and town councils, or whether we believe we have a future with them to cover our costs, because we should not have a car park that is costing the general council taxpayer money. It should all be cost neutral one way or another, at the very least. And obviously, hopefully Simon Davey gets a few quid back as well at the same time, but nevertheless, we shouldn't be costing anyone anything. So I ask we look at those again at a very near future.
Yeah. Well, I do agree. Car parks shouldn't be a liability to East Devon.
Yeah.
There's no way you keep something that's a liability. You make it so it's profitable, or sell it, one or the other, basically.
Exactly.
Councillor Ellen Rylands.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Hello?
I can. Thank you.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay. All right. So I actually do have a specific question about the free car parks, and this is probably for Andrew Ennis or for Simon Davey if he's still here. I understand that we're paying business rates on our car parks estate. Is that itemised per car park, and is it payable on the car park whether we earn any income from it or not? Or is it a notional sum that's applied across, say, every car parking space? I mean, are you gathering together all the business rate bill and evening it out again? And the same question really for the maintenance. I think I asked this question probably back in January, actually, and I think you answered that actually it was averaged out over the car parks, but I can't remember.
Okay, I can help with both of those, Chair. And the car parking business rates are specific to each car park, so I can provide the TAFF with a breakdown if they so wish. I certainly provided it for the previous TAFF. So that is at the base, I think, of the questions that were asked earlier about why some car parks charge business rates and others are not charged business rates. In terms of maintenance, it's slightly more tricky. Some of the larger maintenance costs are now attributed to individual car parks. For example, if we want to resurface it, tarmac is ruinously expensive. It may well cost 50, 100, even 200,000 pounds to resurface a large car park. That does then show in the budget for that specific car park, but there are other ongoing maintenance costs that are spread across the whole portfolio.
May I come back, Chair?
Yes.
So Andrew, sorry, is there but through you, Chair, is there actually a zero business rate tariff on car parks that are nothing?
I'm afraid there isn't. It's on their notional value. So the ones that earn nothing generally we are paying business rates on them. From memory, the only ones where we don't pay any business rates are ones that are exempt because they happen to be open land adjacent to an estuary or the sea. So for reasons I don't fully understand, to be honest, but they are zero rated for business rates. For example, the Imperial Recreation Ground car park in Exmouth, Limekiln car park in Budley Salterton, for example, don't pay business rates because they fit that category.
Thank you. And may I ask a second question, Chair?
Can I just come back on the car parking with regards to business rates? I think business rates are charged at about £300 per car parking spaces. So if it's a lined out car parking spaces, you pay business rates on that space and it's judged accordingly. So if you've got 15 parking spaces, you're charged 15 times whatever the rate is per parking bay. That's correct, isn't it?
300 quid a year.
Well, not necessarily,
yeah, I mean,
but it's a figure that they give you when the rates office come down. They give you a figure per parking space, and it's multiplied by the number of parking spaces on that car park.
Yeah.
That's
Chair,
right,
just to assist, it is slightly more complicated in that it does also relate to the location of the car park. So some of our car parks are really expensive. You know, we'll pay over £100,000 of business rates for some of them, and then others will be much cheaper because of where they are. But the total bill for the portfolio is just over £500,000 in a year.
Yeah, it's your income generated, isn't it, per space is what you pay your VAT on, your rates on.
Well, there must be a notion.
Back to the Councillor Ranger, Councillor Rylance's question. It's the potential income. We don't have to be charging for it. It's still rated as though we could.
So that's the question I wanted to ask. The other thing I wanted to say was just to pick up on something that Councillor Hayward said, and that some of our car parks are actually in the ownership of other bodies. So, for example, the car park in Broadcliffe is actually in the ownership. The freehold belongs to the National Trust. So it starts to become extremely complicated because the National Trust also own a significant number of their houses around Broadcliffe and direct their tenants to park excess cars in the car park. So we have residential parking there as well.
I don't want to comment in too much detail on Broadcliffe, but I believe East Devon own the freehold of most of it. But I think there might be a small strip that's owned by the National Trust within that car park. And they do own the adjacent parking area next to their properties. But generally, I understood from our property services team that we do own outright the freehold of most of those 57 car parks I referred to in the introduction.
I don't think that's what the National Trust think.
Yeah, well, there's a piece of work to be done. Yeah, absolutely. I don't want to get into the specifics of that one because I'm not fully briefed on it. I'm speaking from memory, but our property services team are talking about maintenance costs as though we do own the freehold of it, with albeit some what's the legal term where we have a
ransom strip.
There's a ransom strip, but also a liability referring back to the original owner. I can't remember the legal term.
Yep.
Hereditaments.
No. It's it doesn't matter. We need to get to the bottom of this one, Councillor Rylance. I thought we owned all of it, but whether we do or not, there's a discussion to be had, so we do understand it properly. But in general, I'm led to believe the car parks we manage are in general owned outright by East Devon District Council.
Right. Councillor Coleman.
Just 2 points. First is the point raised about saying that the council can't use car parks as the cash cow. Isn't that really sort of invalidated by the fact we need to reduce environmental impact, we've got climate emergency. So can't we basically use the climate emergency as a genuine reason to raise charges? But obviously, I suggest obviously part of that should be using some of the money to reduce car dependency, particularly as essential car travel. We should be making sure that the public have easier options to not use a car. The second point which came up was about a bit of an elephant in the room, I suppose. It's about the county council. Are there any ways, perhaps this group, or we could work closer with the county council to come up with a more unitary, a more agreed, a common system to manage the car parks, so they can put up the prices a bit more in conjunction with what we do? I think we will need to work with the county. Sounds like we will have to work with Devon County Council at some point. So, yes, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Wibley.
Hi there. Yeah, I've been coming in and out of the meeting because of technical stuff, so I think I am in the right place. Councillor Howe said that it's like starting again, and in some ways it is, but also there are many things that we're sort of not talking about that were mentioned last time, which we never actually got the chance to develop and to actually think properly about. So Councillor Coleman just mentioned the working with county, and earlier on it was spoken about we can't just increase car parking charges without affecting levels of on-street parking and causing issues there. Well, to take, and it's the same example as last year because it's taken so long to sort out at county. But you have the colony consultation where they're asking people if they want a parking permit scheme, which is right next to several car parks in Exmouth. The results of that come out in December. And these things are so intertwined. So the car parking charges in one place going up will mean there's more pressure on parking there. And there does really, as Councillor Coleman suggested, there really, really needs to be at some point in this TAFF process, some sort of consultation with county, and we do all need to work together. Second point, really briefly, I think the idea of airs, the camping things in car parks is absolutely fantastic. I know there'll be a huge, I've had people ask me about them before it was even sort of mentioned here. And thirdly, it strikes me just really quickly, generally, the idea of putting up car parking charges at the moment doesn't seem correct because we're looking to increase, sort of maintain and regenerate town centres after the shops have closed during the pandemic. So I don't know if this is something we can suggest, but can we project forward where we don't increase charges now, but plan charges for the next 2 or 3 years in a sort of small charge increase over the next couple of years, so that we know that our income stream will increase, but at this point we still seem to be supporting local businesses. That's me done.
Or whatever this committee decides goes to full council with recommendations. So that's what we're here to make recommendations to council regarding the parking. I mean, one way we could increase our parking income is on a supply and demand basis, because lots of times on a Saturday or on the coast on a Sunday, you drive around, you look for a parking space and you can't find one. And we're charging the same for that as on a Monday morning where there's loads of parking spaces. So on a supply and demand basis, we could possibly increase our prices that way.
That's 2 ideas all in one there. That's great.
Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Chair. I'm glad Councillor Coleman moved us on to the climate emergency, because I think that's the elephant in the room. And I think car parking needs to be part of a strategy through which we address the climate emergency. I don't know if anybody else has been going to the excellent LGA series of seminars on decarbonising transport, but they've been absolutely excellent. And in fact, the one on Tuesday was called Climate Smart Parking Policies. Interestingly enough, the issue of how much you charge for car parks didn't come up. What it was all about was providing alternatives. And I think we would be perfectly justified in raising car parking charges to discourage people from driving into town centres and using those to subsidise bus services, to subsidise shuttle buses for the seafront, but I'm thinking particularly in Exmouth, and to install electric car charging. And I think there's a very good argument to be made there. Somehow we have got to get people out of their cars. One of the concepts that came up in Tuesday's talk was the 15-minute city. And the idea of that is that nobody is more than 15 minutes walk away, that's about a mile, from the services that they need access to on a daily basis. Actually, within the town I live in, Exmouth, 15 minutes, you can walk quite a long way in 15 minutes, but a lot of people drive into the town centre. There's usually actually a misperception by shops that the majority of people drive to their shops. The majority of people walk to their shops. And the number who actually rely on driving up and hopping out of the car and making purchases is relatively limited. I think we could still justify this. We're not talking about closing car parks completely. We're just saying if you wish to drive into the town centre, then you're going to have to pay for it. And you make a contribution, which then is used to fund more sustainable ways of making that town centre viable.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, if you want to go down the environmentally friendly route, I mean, you could always increase the charge on people that drive into these car parks with a diesel car, for example. There's various things you can do to go down that agenda. Councillor Ingham. Oh, sorry. Councillor Ingham.
Sir, yeah.
Do you want to finish, Ollie? Because I think you're going to...
No, it was just to say, I think trying to distinguish between different types of vehicle would be...
Okay, I think Ollie's been frozen, Chair.
Yeah.
Not to make free parking for electric cars, but to charge for those as well, because otherwise you're making yourself a hostage to fortune in the future.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think what Ollie said is quite interesting. You know, I wish 12 months ago more people thought like Councillor Davey is now, because we wouldn't be in the pickle we are with money moving forward. And I hear what Simon Davies said. I think he's right, with regards to, charging. What Andrew was saying, I think is, well, it was relevant in 2019, but it isn't now. We've got a huge debt, Chair.
Yeah.
We've got to sort that out. We've got huge aspirations for a climate emergency agenda and funding that. I remember last year when, it was decided that I think it was £325,000 was adequate for climate emergency to save the planet. Is that what East Devon's going to give? I think we've got to give a whole lot more. And I think that it should be those people that drive cars, whether they're diesel or petrol, have got to fund that. And first of all, I mean, it's shocking that the car park charges haven't gone up in 10 years. That's got to go up by a minimum of 10%, Chair. And also with this climate emergency agenda, we've got to get people to stick their hand in their pocket and not just say, oh, well, someone else is going to pay for all this. If we want charging points for electric cars, that money's got to come from somewhere and quickly, not over 10 years. We want that as quickly as possible. So you've got to charge for charging points. It's that simple. So I'd say you put another 10% on, and then that 10% each year is cumulative going into funding those charging points so that we get them right across all of our car parks as soon as possible. And with regards to some car parks not contributing, that's just totally unacceptable. I think there should be a much, much lower fee for somewhere, I say Newton Poppleford's got to pay, whether that's 50p an hour instead of what everyone else is paying at any other new new charging car parks, whether it start at 25p. I don't know what the right amount is, but we've all got to contribute to this, and we've got to start saying, well, what's causing the problem? We know it's cars. We've got that within our ability to start putting things right. Those fees have to go up, Chair, to fund the aspirations of the people who are paying the council tax. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers on this particular part of the meeting? No. One thing I was thinking of regarding, oh, sorry, Councillor Mike Howe.
Thank you. It's just one other thing while people have been saying those things. One of the other things we haven't considered yet is using car shares in our car parks. And obviously electric car shares are the things, and electric bike shares as well, and everything else. We should be looking at dedicating our more popular car parks, a proportion of, into a shared electric car scheme. And other things. So we need to be looking broader and what returns those can get. As I understand, other councils and Devon County are making money as a return for giving up car parking spaces for these car shares, co-car, whatever they're called, and others. So I think we just need to be a bit more broad in looking at the environmental aspects, because cars aren't just the be-all and end-all of the disaster. They also save us. It's just so much space is used in car parking spaces at home. If you don't need a car at home and just need to borrow one once a week or whatever it is, this is the ideal way to do it. So I think we need to be a bit more open about what we're trying to do as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. I was going to say that one of the things that I've noticed going around the car parks is the number of people that offer you their ticket. They've bought a ticket for 2 hours and come and give you a ticket and say, "Yo, would you like this? I've got an hour and a half left." So that person is then getting 3 parking. There must be some way we can try and prevent that from happening. I know it wouldn't be a cheap exercise, but it's surprising what you would get back in return for it. Are there any other speakers on this part of the agenda? No.
There are no more blue hands up. No.
Thank you. We go to back to Andrew, if that's okay, on the asset management and review generation.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, that's great. It's really interesting to hear members' views on the climate emergency. So that's item 1. Item 2 on the discussion document is asset manager and revenue generation. But Chair, you mentioned the item I'd included as item 5. Do you want me to deal with that now in response to what you just raised, or should we wait until we get to it?
We'll wait till we get there.
Fine. Okay. Well, I think we've heard from a number of people, including Councillor Ingham and Simon Davey and Councillor Hayward. It's a reality, I think, that our car parks property is actually turning over around, it's just over 4 million before you take off VAT, so over 3 million after VAT, and if you take off all the running costs, it's about 2.5 million into the council's general fund. It's clearly a significant amount of money, and we've previously been asked to calculate what that would mean in terms of council tax, and we found it would be approximately a 40% increase for the average Band D household in East Devon. And we simply can't just do that. So we couldn't stop it and replace it with council tax overnight. It's just not possible. I think it's open information that there's an expectation in our outlined budget strategy for next year that car parking revenue could potentially deliver an extra £425,000 in revenue income for the coming financial year, with some adjustments to our current charging tariff. I think this expectation has largely come from the Cabinet report I prepared last October, which actually started this whole scrutiny and TAFF process in the first place. And it's in that report, if we want to turn to that when the chair's ready, that sets out a number of opportunities where I felt this, certainly the overused higher demand car parks, where customers are often driving around at peak times looking for a space, could actually stand to have a more expensive tariff, which would make us some more money, I think, because they would still fill up, but it would also send a signal to motorists that they might want to switch their behaviour to other ways of coming into town, or even to going to a slightly less convenient car park and walking the rest of the distance. And in every case in that report, I did suggest an alternative car park where customers could carry on paying the current tariff and just walk a little bit further, and those car parks did have capacity. The second income generating initiative in that paper was, as we've already talked about in the introduction, those car parks that are currently running at a deficit. It costs us more money to run them than they actually make for us. There's a league table, if you want me to present it in that way, of the amount of money our car parks earn, either per car park or per space. And there are some big hitters, places like the London Inn car park next to the Magnolia Centre in Exmouth, the Imperial Road car park next to the railway station in Exmouth, Ham car parks in Sidmouth, Lace Walk car park in Honiton, earn a very significant amount of our revenue. They are doing really well. Other car parks, for example, we talked about the car park in Broadcliffe, the car park in Newton Popperford, don't make us any revenue, and they do have a significant running cost, including occasional maintenance items, which, for example, the Broadcliffe car park is facing the next couple of years, which are actually running into tens of thousands of pounds. You know, they're very significant costs when you have to retarmac a car park, or rebuild retaining walls, or sort out boundary walls, and those occasional bits of maintenance. So we're there or thereabouts with those in that report. The third opportunity I'd suggested was the evening economy, which, when we look back from this point for the last 6 months, is more tricky. But in general, East Devon towns had seen our car parks very well used between 6 and perhaps 9 or 10 p.m. With people visiting the towns with their bars and restaurants, and in terms of the town's short stay car parks, we currently stopped charging at 6 p.m. so they all park for free. And again, I was suggesting there is an amount of money to be made by imposing or introducing an evening tariff to allow us some extra resources to properly manage the parking in those car parks during the evenings, and in turn a little bit of extra revenue would be coming in fact, a significant amount of extra revenue. So they were the three elements of where I saw possible asset management generating more revenue in a relatively sensitive way. There is, of course, the option that Councillor Ingham suggested, where we could simply say, look, we haven't put these up now for 10 years, and it is 10 years this year. It's high time. I mean, one of the reasons I didn't and have never suggested putting the prices up is there was a very significant adverse reaction in the media and with the public when we did so. Prior to my tenure, I hasten to add, but we put them up from 85 pence an hour to £1 an hour, and I've still got a very substantial folder of press cuttings from that period where there was an outcry that we'd overdone it. We put the short stay car parks up to £10 a day, which again felt it was overdone. So I think it's taken us a lot of years to get to a place where we are now, where I think our car parking is amongst the cheapest in the area, and certainly when our visitors come, they mention anecdotally to the officers in the field that, wow, that's really cheap. I can't believe that's only £6 a day. That's fantastic. So we're in a place where I think there is now enough headroom to look at the way we manage car parks, to propose an increase in tariffs that is still about prudent management. Will still fit in with our work with the county council on perhaps the bigger picture of not encouraging as much town centre parking, perhaps, although there is a debate as we look down into the next section of the visitor economy. There's still a number of town centre businesses who would like plentiful free town centre parking to attract businesses, but I'm suggesting there is headroom. We could safely and responsibly increase the tariff this year to provide that much needed revenue, but still be responsibly managing traffic flow and congestion, and perhaps being brave and working towards tackling the climate emergency, as Councillor Davey and others have suggested, through new policies, if you're so minded, where we could even look at differential charging tariffs or a progressive increase in charging tariffs for certain car parks over a number of years to send a signal to motorists that they need to find alternative ways of coming into town. I think that's probably what I need to say on asset management, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I know you offered and you said you could do it, but I mean, if you could get the individual car park income and expenditure to members of the committee, it'd be one way of us trying to work a way forward with charges and trying to get extra income for East Devon.
Yeah, I have a detailed spreadsheet, as I think members who were on the previous TAFF will remember, which I'm very happy to share if you'll find that helpful.
Thank you. Is that okay with the committee? Would they like that? Yep, I'm getting thumbs up from people. Yes, thank you, Andrew.
I mean, I could present it on the screen now, but it's very detailed. I don't think we get very far with it. I think people would need to take it away and read it.
Yeah, we've got a week to look at it and come back with any, I can see a laugh there, come back with any questions that we might have.
Sure.
Committee, anyone would like to speak on this? Councillor Ingham, did you raise your hand then?
Yes, I did, Chair. I don't know how the rest of the TAFF would feel about this, but the circumstances at the end of this year are so radically different from what we had last year. Maybe it will be an idea to task Andrew Ennis and Simon Davey to work together to come up with a revamped report to see what they believe would be an affordable way forward, taking on board what we've said with regard to every community contributing, maybe a general increase of 5 or 10%, trying to find other streams, as you know, Councillor Hayward had said in his email, looking to the future and seeing how that pans out, not just for 1 year, but let's say for the next 3 years, not fixing what the increase would be, but to say, give us a few projections, yeah, rather than us guessing what's acceptable. Let's see what we get. You know, what's the bang for our buck? What can we actually contribute to the climate agenda, and what would achieve? You know, what would we have to do to achieve those targets? I think that would be interesting. We don't have to take them up, but it'd be interesting to see what options we have. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I mean, is that possible? I'm asking the two officers.
from my point of view, it is eminently possible to come up with some detailed suggestions about how we could make this additional revenue. So I'd be happy to work with Simon on that. Whether Simon and I could achieve that by next Thursday is a different question. I'm looking to Simon to respond.
Yeah, I'm sure we can put something together, even if we've got work outstanding. But I'm sure we can. This is one of my main priorities in helping to balance the budget next year. So yes, we'll do it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Jack Rowland with his blue hand raised, but he's not a member of this committee. Is it relevant to this part of the meeting that?
Thank you, Chair. I fully appreciate I'm not a member of the committee, but as I was involved in the previous TAFF on this subject, and also in view of my finance portfolio holder functions, I was obviously interested in hearing what was being said today. I apologise, I missed the first hour of the meeting, so because I was at another meeting, so I apologise for that. I just wanted to stress from a finance point of view, and I'm sure this has already been said earlier, so I apologise, but Simon touched on the subject already again about a balanced budget, which is something I hear probably every day. And we've got so many competing issues around this particular subject, because you've got the climate agenda pressures that are coming in. We've got, from the business point of view, I'm sure if a poll was done of all the businesses that are in town centres, they'd be, one of the things they'd come up with is we want free parking, which is just not feasible at the moment anyway. From a personal point of view, I take the view that what we should be doing for those car parks which are usually oversubscribed, particularly during the summer months, and for people that are coming in from outside the area, whether we can have a higher tariff for them compared to actual residents. I think that would go some way to help increase the income, especially in view of what you heard you say earlier as well, that quite often tourists that are coming in are quite often amazed about what they are paying compared to what they would have to pay elsewhere. So I would like to see that taken into account in the deliberations of this committee. As I said, there are so many competing subjects around this which have just been exacerbated by both COVID and the green agenda, that it's not going to be an easy one to find the right solution, because whatever we do, we are not going to please all of the people, whatever decision is come up to. But if we can actually please the majority of people and properly communicate the reasons behind it, that's what I'd like to see come out of recommendations from this TAFF committee. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak, even though I'm not a member of the TAFF. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Now, you can never please all the people all the time. Councillor Mike Howe.
Actually, it was a very opportune moment that Councillor Rowland spoke just before me, because what I wanted to say was very similar. We are and have been looking particularly at the green agenda and our own finances, which we all fully understand. But let's face it, the next year isn't going to be pleasant for many other businesses, many other residents, or anything else either. So we do have a fine, very fine line to walk between keeping our towns as vibrant as we can through a very tricky 12, 18 months, and keeping our own finances reasonable so we can support people and businesses that need it in the next 12, 18 months at the same time. So, you know, it is that very point. We can't just go willy-nilly just throwing prices up, because our town centres will suffer if we're not very careful. But at the same time, you know, a 5% increase on the car parks, or if it's a fully oversubscribed car park, how do you shorten the amount of time people spend in those car parks so you get a better turn through? You know, most shopkeepers, and obviously being one, but not one involved in any of our car parks, thankfully, you know, would like short turnaround, sort of an hour or two free. not a full day or free, totally free car park, but most shoppers pop in and out of towns, grab a coffee, grab a newspaper, do whatever they want in a relatively short span of time and get out again. People don't go and spend all day in town anymore unless it's a shopping centre with cinemas and everything else in. We haven't got that atmosphere in our towns, unfortunately. We could do with it, but we haven't got it. So we just got to walk that fine tightrope of finding that fine line between what we can raise, how we can keep the availability of car parking spaces, and at the same time keep the charges as reasonable as possible for the next 18 months or so to try and help the towns out as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers on this part of the meeting? No? Right. Andrew, would you like to go on to the third part, 2.3, visitor economy, wellbeing and poverty considerations?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. That's probably very good timing, bearing in mind the comments we just heard from Councillor Roden and Councillor Howe. So what I'm saying here is absolutely recognise that the prospect of increasing our car parking charges during and hopefully immediately following this pandemic will be seen by a lot of people as either high risk or even completely inappropriate. However, I just balance that with what I see as the prospect of likely increases now in visitor numbers. I think people will, as they did last summer, choose the UK and choose Southwest as a holiday destination. I think there may well be scope for maximising the income potential of some of our car parks, not the ones I'm suggesting. And at the same time, I think we just need to look really carefully at what we can do for local people to mean that doesn't impact either at all or impacts very much less on them individually and on local businesses and particularly people who have to work in the town. And this is all there to support what I think is now one of our priorities to retain that resilient, that balanced local economy. I think what I'd ask you to think about, and we've already got it to some extent, is a really affordable parking permit that's accessible for local residents and businesses. The one we have at the moment is £100 for the whole year, which is just £2 a week. But I think a number of you would make a point that, you know, if we look at the number of people we've had furloughed who've lost their jobs locally, who are really struggling, the number of universal credit claimants has gone through the roof. We know that from our revenues and benefits team. There's a lot of people in hardship. £100 might be quite hard to find. We've always argued it's neither here nor there compared to the costs of running a car and servicing a car and fueling a car and so on. But £100 in one lump might be. So it's something we might want to talk about. Could we have a pay monthly permit? You know, could we do £10 a month, for example? So any local business or any local resident, if they don't want to pay the new charges in the car park, they can simply have a permit that allows them to park anywhere in their own town for £10 a month, or for a bit more, anywhere in any East Devon car park. It's just a thought as to where we might go with this, but I think there does have to be that recognition that in the previous section, we do want to work the assets, we do need to generate the revenue, but we could probably do that maximising the income from visitors and, you know, being a little bit more sensitive to the needs of local businesses and residents. I think that's all on that one, Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much. Committee, would anyone like to come in on that?
Thank you very much.
Chair, Councillor Arnott has his hand up.
Yeah, I can see he's got his hand up. Not another person who's not a member of the committee, Paul, but if it's relevant, yes, carry on.
Apologies, Chair. I thought you were going through bit by bit in and out of the committee, so I won't make that mistake again. Thank you very much. I'll be very, very brief. just incredibly impressed by everybody's contributions today. I think everybody's on the same page. We've got to be prudent about this. We've got to raise money. We mustn't destroy local businesses. We must be mindful of the hit to the local economy. All of these things are true. The one that Andrew has just spoken about so well, though, that I would say we do need to have settled in the next few months is this matter of the visitor economy. We know that we've got another staycation summer coming. Hopefully, it looks as if that'll definitely be happening. Last summer was absolutely extraordinary. We saw it off the scales. The problem for this council is that although that was in the end fantastic for many of the local businesses in certain resorts, for us as a council, it was incredibly expensive because of the street scene costs that went through the roof, because of the amount of extra refuse and bin collections we had to do throughout the day. So I think, although everything Andrew says is absolutely right about ensuring that local people and local businesses can still use these key car parks, we must look at, just as he's suggesting, the key tourist car parks, and we must maximise the value we get from those, I would say. And that seems to me a priority, perhaps, as you consider the more nuanced work to do with climate change agenda and to do with the different tariffs you may wish to apply between different towns, which is another different point. Thank you for letting me speak, Chair, and I shall hold my peace now. Thank you.
I don't believe that bit. Thank you very much. Right, we've got a number of speakers that want to come up, but before they come in, I mean, with regards to our local parking tariff, I mean, at the moment, I think we charge £100 for it, but that is for any number of vehicles, I think, for on that one, or any number. I mean, they get 2 vehicles for that. I mean, we could change that slightly and have, you know, £100 example for one vehicle. And if there's 2 vehicles in the house, charge them £120. But they can only use it in one car park. In the sense they can't have both cars parked in East Devon car parks at the same time. That would produce somebody, because it used to be like that years ago when you had a little round disc and you set your time on it when you went in the car park, and you had 2 registration numbers on it, but you paid extra for that. So that's another thing we could do to possibly get some more money in, as well as doing a monthly payment, which people would find 10 times easier. Sorry, Councillor Willoughby.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Chair. Just listening to Councillor Arnott there. He was kind of thinking similar thing to me. But in terms of the urgency with which Councillor Arnott suggested we need to do this, I think that's really, really important, because if we say we do have a fantastic staycation summer next year, the chances are the year after people are going to be aching to get away. So any gains we could have made next year will have gone. I personally think, so using Exmouth again as an example, because it's the one I know best, beach car parks, I would be happy to see an increase there, because you do have some very, very different styles of car parks and different sites of car parks. So beach car parks that are designed for tourists, they are very, very full as it is. I don't actually have a problem with increasing it there. But so to add to the problem that it's a difficult tightrope that we're walking, it's also one we have to walk along really quickly. So that's my point.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, you know, what we recommend has got to be sort of between this meeting and the next meeting. Our recommendations have got to get into scrutiny, whose meeting is on the 10th of December. And then that recommendations, what we make, will go to council, so that all the decisions can be made in time for the budget to be made. That's correct, Mr. Davey? Yep, we've got a thumbs up there. Councillor Ingham.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I have to say that, you know, we wasted a year on this. What a shame that we got political on it. We certainly can't afford to do that now. You're quite right there, Chair. So is Andrew reminding us, and was it Paul there? Paul Webley saying that, you know, we've got to crack on with this. without question we have to. If we can reasonably assume that the vaccine's not going to be available widely until, say, the summer, then yes, we've got this coming summer to cash in, not ruthlessly, but fairly and reasonably, because in 2022, flying will take place again. People will, once they are able to travel safely, they won't be coming as much as I believe they will be in next summer. The direct debit is just a no-brainer, isn't it? We should be doing that kind of stuff all the time to make sure that the people we represent are able to go about their lives and do the things they need to do without having huge bills once a year and being able to spread those costs. And I would be hoping, Chairman, that when Simon and Andrew make their report, next week, this is all going to be part of it. The most I'd hope that, you're going to have 2 or 3 options, but they're saying, well, we're not suggesting you make a decision tonight, but this is what it's got to be within this ballpark here, and so that Cabinet can move forward, make the recommendations, and it goes straight into the budget, and we have a sea change in our income stream from car parks as of next year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Mike Howe.
Thank you very much again. Multitude of things. I mean, obviously, if we've got to make a decision, and I do agree, we need to make a decision very quickly, then we need to limit what that decision is for, because I don't think we can do this whole category of work in a week or so. So I suggest that next week we discuss those prime car parks, the ones we are expecting to make and increase the most revenue. That's the wrong way of putting it. To make the most revenue and turnover from, the ones down the seafront, the ones in town centres that are oversubscribed. And also I would like us to discuss, to come up with a recommendation to go to full council also on the parking permit. Now, I have some doubts on this, or questions around how it operates. Already direct debit, I think, is a great way forward. But if you have a parking permit, and not having one, obviously I don't know, does that entitle you to park in any of our car parks all day? Because if we're putting our prices up in our prime car parks, because we want to move out for people to the more, not quite in our prime location, shall we say, to our less used car parks, then our car parking permits also need to reflect some change in that as well. So people are allowed to park, but shouldn't be taking up our most revenue intensive spaces on a very cheap car parking ticket, if you get my meaning. So we need to work very carefully and hand in hand over the two. So I just would like those 2 things to be discussed next time, so we can come to a decision on those only, and then work through the rest of everything else we need to do over the next God knows how long. Thank you.
I think it's a 2-tier car parking system we work, isn't it? You pay one fee of, I think, £100 or whatever it is for your local car park, for your local area, and then you pay an extra fee if you want to park in any car park in East Devon. I think that's correct, or that's the way it used to be, isn't it, Andrew?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the permit allows you to stay all day in the long stay car parks, either in your local town, as Councillor Brown said, for £100, or in any long stay car park across East Devon if you pay the higher fee, which is an extra £20 per town to add extra towns to your permit. And that's maxed out at £200 for every single town in East Devon. At the moment, that permit also allows you to stay for a maximum stay of 3 hours in the short stay car parks without paying a cash tariff. And that's something we could look at based on what Councillor Howe's just suggested as to whether some of the prime car parks are going to be okay with permit holders still staying in them for 3 hours, whether we might need to consider that's a shorter stay, or possibly even having certain car parks where permit holders aren't allowed to use their super cheap permits. So we'll have a look at that and see what that looks like for you next time.
I mean, that's the sort of thing I was very much talking about. We need to keep car parks that oversubscribed ones turning over, so we need to be very mindful they're not filling up with business users and everything else on a very cheap
Yeah.
ticket.
We have done that, Chair. The only car park where we've taken that step, or two now, we've taken that step in the very small car park in Beer, on 4th Street in Beer, where there are only 10 parking bays, and we were concerned that permit holders would be a step too far. They would just clutter the place up and block the car park. So we said that is not suitable for permit holders. Equally, we've imposed the same restriction at the Manor Pavilion car park in Sidmouth for a slightly different reason, and that was because the revenue for that car park goes exclusively to the theatre. So we couldn't find a way of sharing permit revenue with the theatre, so that is cash or card payments only. So the model already exists, and we could extend that now to other car parks if the forum feels that's the right thing to do.
Thank you. Councillor Coleman.
Hello again. Just another thought. You mentioned the thing that £100 might be a bit steep for people to fork out. I was just wondering whether you could have another option. People could buy a ticket, maybe a voucher, say at £20, a bit like a network card on the trains. Then people got, for £20 annual subscription, you got half price parking, probably at off-peak times most of the time. That could, I think, maybe a lot more people might be interested in taking up and buying this £20 pass or the £100 pass, but they're still given access to privileged access to car park or cheaper parking most of the year. So probably pay for it, may be more popular.
So, Chair, can I come back on that one?
Yeah, of course.
Just very quickly, Councillor Coleman. Yes, I mean, we already offer a 3-day permit for £15 and a 7-day permit for £25. And they have been popular. What we're thinking of now is something that sort of bridges the gap between those shorter term, slightly more expensive permits and the annual permit, which is just £100. So yeah, I think we should have a look at it and see what works best for customers. But something that's £10 a month or thereabouts for residents might be quite helpful. Visitors are probably okay with the weekly option at £25, to be honest. They seem to be quite happy with that. And weekend visitors tend to buy the 3-day one at £15.
Yeah, what I suggested was an annual ticket for about £20 or £30, so it's got your half price parking. So you got reduced, which would be a bit less money to fork out, but still be useful. Then potentially very useful and mean that local people can have increase the charges for visitors if local people be less affected.
Okay, thank you.
So, Councillor Ingham.
Sorry to come back, Chairman, but you know, when we say things that are controversial, or I consider them controversial, I've got to come back. I've got to say that, you know, local cars are just as polluting as visitors' cars. And so the point is to see this as an income stream. And also I'd say to Mike is that, look, Simon and Andrew have been, this is all part of their job. They've been looking at this nonsense for 10 years, yeah, humiliated by the bad ideas of different councillors. This is too important. We've got to get on with this, and we've got to take these decisions as soon as possible. And I can see that Simon's almost frozen there. I thought he'd gone offline. It's because he knows how serious this is. And this is the one access point we've got to try and balance our books. Let's get on with it. Let's listen to what Andrew and Simon advise us, rather than us trying to second guess an amateurs what the answer might be. Thanks, Chair.
Well, we have got to get on with this. We have got to get any recommendations that come forward into scrutiny for the 10th of December, so we can get it into council, so that we can get it recommended in the budget and everything approved. So it's not something we're going to sit on our backside and discuss time and time again. It's something we're going to get on with and get resolved. Thank you. Councillor Bloxham.
Yeah, thank you. I've obviously been listening all afternoon. I'm sure most of us can remember the meeting we had that started this TAFF off, and I think that meeting went on for a number of hours and everybody's concerns raised about the car parking. I do come from Cranbrook, of course, with no car parking, so I'm not speaking from experience, but of course we have no town centre, so we don't need any car parking. But listening to everybody this afternoon, and I was on the TAFF in the last year, there are a number of good ideas now, a number of good ideas that came up in the TAFF last time. We do need to move on. Perhaps if the officers came back next week with an updated report, taking into account all the conversations and all the good ideas, because listening to some, I think some of them are not going to be picked up unless something comes back to us next week from the officers with an updated report, and it may have one or two different proposals that we can debate, but surely that would give us the opportunity then to debate that rather than keep going round and round discussing the same things. We need to just pick up some of these really good ideas, get a recommendation done and move on. Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, I agree with that. Right, we've been going for nearly 2 hours at the moment. I don't know whether people would like a break for 10 minutes or whether you want to continue the next two parts. No, carrying on, are we? Yep. Right, Andrew, the camper vans and motorhomes.
Thank you, Chair. I think, okay, it's one small area of car parking policy, but I think it is an area that is probably overdue for a refresh. I think it's also an area where there is an opportunity for it to generate some revenue for us. So I thought it was worth asking you to consider it today. We continue to see an increasing number of camper vans and larger motorhomes on our roads and in our public car parks. They're here, you know, that's the reality. A lot of people have bought them, people are using them. And I don't know for sure what the consequences of the pandemic will be, but I've heard that van sales are on the up. Lots of people are converting vans to camper vans. I think it was Councillor Davey who mentioned earlier as well that it is important to have facilities for camper vans and motorhomes in town centres. I do look at the online forums. There's a campaign running at the moment looking for the UK to introduce airs in its towns. There is a growing body of opinion out there that motorhome users don't particularly want to go to a supermarket to buy their food and then drive to an out-of-town campsite to cook it. They're actually quite keen to be in towns and to explore towns and to spend their money in towns. So I don't know if that's a reality or not, but I think there's an opportunity for us to find out. So what we've been doing for the last 3 summers now in Exmouth is running a small pilot. That's all we were sort of given freedom to do in East Devon. There was a nervousness that you know, camper vans and motorhomes aren't necessarily good for towns. They take up space and they bring the wrong sort of people, perhaps, and they don't spend money in the town businesses. But Exmouth Town felt that probably wasn't the case in Exmouth. They did want to encourage motorhome and camper van customers, but they had a particular problem in the town where these visitors were parking on the street, on the seafront, blocking views, causing congestion and other issues, and they wanted this pilot to take place. What I take from the pilot is there is a demand. Certainly the demand in the car parks where we have a nice view with no other facilities at all have been huge. They've pretty much been full of camper vans, and in one case, and that was the Imperial Recreation Ground, we had to end the pilot after 2 summers because we had so many complaints that no one else was getting a look in. The local water users couldn't park up to go kite surfing or paddleboarding because the car park was full overnight and all day with motorhomes. So the demand for sure is proven. I think one of the problems we have to address is the current East Devon policy does prohibit the overnight parking of camper vans and motorhomes in any of our car parks, except for the ones that were in the pilot. So we have, through that policy, prevented residents who don't have off-street parking of their own, but use a small converted van as part of their daily transport. We prevent them from parking overnight in their local car park, which was probably, certainly from my point of view, was unintended. What we intended to prevent was the large-scale storage of motorhomes in our car parks on the cheap. It was causing a problem with lack of supply of parking spaces, frankly, in the winter. They were getting busy. So there's certainly an opportunity to have a careful think now about our policy again, whether we want to encourage overnight sleeping in certain car parks more widely. I think we probably can do that in consultation with ward members. Whether we allow a maximum 3-night stay and treat it as an air, or whether we do something along the lines of what I hinted at earlier for the lorry park in Exmouth and actually create a properly designed facility with pump out and water supply and electric hookup where people could actually go and spend a week if they wanted to. And with either of those options, we could charge accordingly. We could certainly charge £10 or £15 for an overnight stay with no facilities, and we could probably charge £30 or more for a proper serviced motorhome facility down by the estuary in Exmouth. I also think we ought to look carefully at our policy of excluding local people who happen to own a small van that is a camper van, but they use as their regular transport. I see no real reason why they shouldn't be allowed to park there overnight, providing they're not sleeping in it and providing it's not being used there for long-term storage. So I'd welcome members' views on where we ought to go with this policy and whether I'm on the right lines or whether you'd steer me in a different direction. Thank you.
Right, committee. Mike Howe.
Yeah, I have a great deal of sympathy with what Mr. Ernest just said. The issue I suppose I've got is trying to work out who local residents are with their VW camper vans that they do use as a daily run around for their whatever purposes, but haven't got space on, well, they haven't got a drive or anything else to put them on. And surfers and others that use the same van for their recreation sports and camp away for weeks or days stroke weeks on end. And I'm struggling to understand how we can make that distinction of difference. So I'm supportive, fully supportive of what he's saying. I just need to understand how we can work out how we're going to do that. So these smaller camper vans, the day camper vans, that the unserviced ones, can be accommodated in a way that works. I fully would love to see our lorry park down on the ex-estuary converted to a camping site. That would be brilliant. I think that'd be fantastic, right on the estuary trail, and could earn us a good bit of money in that location as well. So there's all sorts of things we can do, and I'm fully supportive of what he wants to do and just how we get there. That's all.
Okay.
Well, the only way I can see of distinguishing between the two is the residents would have to register their address and their registration number with East Devon. Is the only way to get over it. And then anybody who wasn't registered and couldn't be traced, they would be charged the excess charge.
I agree with you, but once you start letting camper vans park in a car park, others go in without really reading the instructions, isn't it? That's the issue you get. You need to lead by example to a certain extent. So maybe we need to go back to having parking permits on display in these camper vans or something to show that they've paid. I don't know. We just need something to show. Sorry.
Yeah. So, Andrew, did you want to come back on something?
I was just going to say, I mean, Chair, you're partly right that is part of the answer for sure, is to be quite clear who is allowed to buy a permit to park overnight regularly, as opposed to being a visitor who's paying the overnight tariff. And that local address is critical, but also how we manage it and enforcement of the car parks is an issue for us. You know, it is one of the complexities, and it's why we ended up with the wholesale banning of overnight parking in the first place. But I think we can make a job of it. I think we can do this if you'd give us the opportunity through a combination of either permits on display, clear signage, and officer patrols, and a little bit of sensible communication with the visitor community. I would not see very many local residents with camper vans being given the permits. I think there would have to be a very special permit to allow camper vans to park overnight, so we would know who they were. I don't see a lot of them being in that category.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I've just done a quick calculation on the figures that were given. I mean, if there was 40 places available on various sites, and they were being charged £30 each over a 20-week period, that would come to £160,000. So it doesn't take long for the income to build up. Right, Councillor Ollie Davey.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I fully support what Andrew is saying there. Firstly, on the aire de camping, as they're called in France, and apologies to Councillor Rylance if she's listening for my accent. But they are hugely popular in France, very well used. They don't have a massive amount of facilities. I've actually never used them. I've always stayed in sites, but they have water. They usually have toilets nearby, and a lot of our campsites, parking sites are near the toilets anyway. With an overnight charge, which could actually be quite steep, because if I park, and I do have a camper van, if I park in a campsite, I can expect to pay between £15 and £20 a night at least for that, and that's some of the cheaper sites. So people would pay £5–10 a night, no problem at all, especially if it was in a nice area. And I actually like parking close to a town centre, because I can walk to the shops, I can walk to the pubs, and I'm not stuck out in a campsite with nothing to do. So I think it's definitely something we should pursue. Put a limited amount of facilities in there, fresh water, chemical toilet disposal, and I'm not sure about electric hookups, because they're probably quite expensive to put in, but I've got an open mind on that, and that could be costed. The other thing I want to talk about is the issue of local residents, because I've had quite a long correspondence with a local resident in Camperdown Terrace. Camperdown Terrace in Exmouth is very congested in terms of parking. He has a relatively small camper van. It's his only vehicle, and he really relies on being able to park it overnight. Now, Councillor Howe has said, how do we make the distinction? He would be quite happy to pay for an annual permit to give him overnight parking in a car park. It could be, the car park has to be within your postcode, or a neighbouring postcode or something like that. It would be quite easy to administer, I'd have thought. As I say, he would be quite happy to pay for an annual permit, or as Andrew said, we could possibly introduce a monthly permit as well. And that could be displayed to show that you had the right to overnight parking. It could be checked occasionally by our car parking officers to check nobody's using them for overnight sleeping as part of their normal round. And I think that would be very, very welcomed by a limited number of people. As Andrew says, we're not talking huge numbers here, but I think they'd be quite happy to pay for it.
Thank you. Councillor Ingham.
Thank you, Chair. I'm agreeing with Councillor Davey again. You know, all of these things, if we put our minds to it, sorry, we don't even have to do that. We ask Andrew to put his mind to it. He'll sort these things out, just as Ollie's described. I'm sure it's all possible. How I see it, Chairman, is that we've really got to change our attitude. And this one's quite a bit different from the other car park issues. I think this one's more of a strategy. How can we really milk this cow, not this year, but for several years? How can we make people in a camper van coming down the M5 turn off at junction 28, 29 or 30 and go no further? We have to provide the facilities that are better and easier and better known than anyone else provides with regards as a local authority. I've absolute confidence we can do that. We're very good at doing everything else when we search for a coherent strategy to control issues, whether that's environmental or recycling or whatever. I'm sure we can do this one just the same, but we have to really look at it, not from our perspective, I'd suggest, but by the camper van owner's perspective. So what is it that would be so cool that they'd start using it straight away, in year 1, 2 and 3, and we don't have to wait 10 years for it to happen? I'm sure we can do it. And there's so much money to be had. And I've sorry, Chairman, I will stop. It's just that everyone's been talking about Exmouth. It's my hometown. I don't have a problem with that. What about Budley? What about Seaton? What about Sidmouth? What about Beer? What about everywhere else on the coast? Definitely having these sort of facilities. And what about some of the places inland, like Axminster? Why can't they have these sort of facilities? So you say that when you want to go camping or in a camper van, you just go to East Devon. It's the place to be. That's what we've got to create. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Jeff Young on with his blue hand raised. He's not a member of this committee. Is it relevant to this part of the agenda?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, it is. Regarding the lorry park in Exmouth, why do we give the lorry park in Exmouth, give the lorries the opportunity of having that wonderful view every night? Now, it's ridiculous. Camper vans are a big issue. And as Ben says, we want to attract holidaymakers, and attracting camper vans is one of those. We do have an issue on the Pebblebed Heaths that camper vans are being parked up there at night, and we would like to encourage them down into the towns. Talking about hookup points, when we're putting in cables for hookup points, we can also put in cables for the car charging at the same time. So kill two birds with one stone. So the idea of camper vans on the lorry park covers about 5 issues in one. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so I'm just popping up with my perennial question about the effect of any changes we might make on disabled people and disability spaces, because if we do raise car parking charges in certain car parks, there will be a disproportionate effect on conveniently located car parks, in my view, which could affect disabled people more than non-disabled people. So I'm just wondering whether we need to do some kind of disability assessment on that.
Well, we can discuss that at the next meeting amongst all the other recommendations that we're making. I can see no other blue hands raised at the moment. So if Andrew can go on to the next part, which is section 5. Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. So the final one was I just headed other matters for consideration. I was going to leave it open, but the chair suggested this one, which you mentioned earlier, which I thought I would include. And this is the, I think, common scenario that you will have all encountered from time to time. Customers leaving one of our car parks, and he leans out of the window and offers the free use of his unexpired ticket to another driver who's just arrived. This may, you're quite right, Chair, may result in us losing a little bit of revenue that would otherwise have been earned from, and that lucky motorist is, feeling good about it, and he's had a win, and he gets his parking, or at least part of it, for free. I think, unlike other councils, we've sort of just accepted that the original motorist has actually already paid for the parking space. So, rather than let customers say, well, why would you make us pay again anyway? We just haven't tried to enforce that one in East Devon, to be honest. It just feels a little bit petty. But if members are minded to pursue this, there is actually a simple option. You can make all of these tickets non-transferable by simply requiring the motorist to tap in on a keypad their vehicle reg at the time they pay for their parking. Anyone who pays by phone already does that. They can't transfer that time. It's just parking for that vehicle reg already. The cost to us is significant. I haven't priced it up, but we've got probably 60 odd pay machines throughout our car parks fleet. None of them can currently do this. Some will need replacing with ones that can do it. Others will need a modification. The more modern ones can have a keypad added. There's a space on the fascia, so we could pay for the electronics. And if members are minded to do this, I could get hold of an upgrade price to do this across the car park portfolio. I've honestly no real view as to how much extra revenue we could make in this way. My suspicion is it wouldn't be a huge amount, and we might lose what we gain in terms of lost goodwill, but I honestly don't know. So I'd be willing to give it a try if members ask me to, and I could come back with a notional price for the upgrade, but it's certainly going to be in the high tens of thousands of pounds. I'll tell you that without even doing a calculation. If a machine needs replacing, it's going to be £4,500 for that one machine, and we've got 60 odd of them. Some won't need replacing, others will just need an upgrade, which might be £1,000. But we've got a lot of money to spend if we're going to do this, but there is potentially income there that we're missing out on, and it's not uncommon. You do see this now in maybe not 50% of the car parks I use across the UK, but I do see it quite commonly.
Thank you.
Is that enough, Councillor?
Yeah, unless there's anything else you need to say.
No, I don't. I was just worried I was giving it too negative a spin. I'm quite open to try it, but I personally don't think there's a huge amount of money to be gained from it. But that's where I am with it.
Right, Councillor Coleman.
Hello. Yeah, I'm a little sceptical of this idea of having to not allowing transferring of tickets. So we'd like some more evidence that it actually does happen once in a blue moon. My personal thing is it's a bit penny pinching, and probably won't. I suspect the cost of changing machines would actually exceed the extra revenue gained. I also think that I've seen these parking meters where you have to type in your registration number. It's a real hassle, particularly if it's pouring with rain and you just want to get the thing working. I really would be against it and take a lot of convincing. An alternative solution I prefer would just be charge people by hour, perhaps by the half hour. That would remove the problem. So I don't like this ban on transferring tickets. So I would vote against it.
I'm always being offered a ticket in Honiton, which I always take. Councillor Davey.
I hope somebody noted that confession from Councillor Brown there.
I take it, but I don't use it.
Send him a bill, Andrew. Yeah, I must say, no, I think this is a non-starter. We don't want to go around altering all our ticket machines just to try and grab in a few more pence. I must say, it doesn't happen very often to me. So I obviously don't have the right sort of face, and Councillor Brown has, but or maybe I just don't drive into town enough. But I don't see it very often as I'm walking around, and I think it's counterproductive. I've also had people contact me to say that they made 1-digit error in putting their number in and ended up getting a parking ticket because they'd incorrectly entered their own number plate. And I think especially for elderly people with poor eyesight and so on, it's just going to be counterproductive. And as Andrew makes the point, if somebody's paid £2 to park for 2 hours and they only park for an hour and they give it to somebody else to park for an hour, we haven't actually lost anything. We just didn't penalise them enough. But no, I think it's a non-starter. I'm quite happy with things as they are.
Councillor Howe.
I'll give it a contrary view, because just for the fun of it. I disagree with the idea of changing all our machines by far, because I think that is a unproven and silly way of going about things. But I would suggest if we are serious about this, and I do agree, I think it's an issue to a certain extent, but we don't know what size of cake it is, sort of thing. We choose one car park with ideally just one machine in that only has the cheap upgrade to do it. You trial it. You don't do it across the whole estate. Counterproductive to Councillor Davey, where I think he's talking about private car parks, and I probably know which car park he's talking about as well. I think, the 3 digits as you get on the seafront at Exmouth, you enter your first 3 digits of your car park. Again, it's most wardens, particularly our wardens, are fairly good at working out. It's one letter out. It's a mistake. It's accidental, that type of thing. It's not like it's done by CCTV, which that car park in particular in Exmouth is, which we're not allowed to do anyway. So that bars that out completely. So I'm a bit more. There could be an issue here, but I wouldn't want to spend us many hundreds of thousands or even tens of thousands in upgrading machines without proving it first. So if we are mindful of this, then I think one car park should be chosen, with the cheapest way of doing the upgrade and seeing if there is a difference or not. That way you can prove it for as little as you think, about £1,000, maybe £2,000, and see what difference it makes. So I'd like more data on it, and I think that's probably the only way to prove it. I must admit, I'm getting offered car parking tickets all the time. But thankfully these days I've got my East Devon permit and I'm nearly always on East Devon business, or used to be anyway. So, it would never apply to me. The hospitals are worse. They're terrible for giving away tickets. But as I say, I think we would need to test it. And that's the only way I can think of working out whether it's viable or not.
Yeah, and the only way to test it is where it's cheap to do so. In a popular car park where we can get away inexpensively, and then we can find out, because that way, worst ways, it wouldn't have cost us any money as such. I'll take the next member of the committee, which is Councillor Ollie Davey.
Sorry, Chair, it was just to come back on that one. Just to say, from a scientific point of view, introducing that change to a car park, if there's a change to the income from the car park, it doesn't necessarily follow that it was due to that particular change. It might be that the car parks become more popular, or we've changed charges elsewhere. So I'm not sure it would be absolutely definitive proof.
Is there any other members of the committee that want to speak before I let in Councillor Paul Miller? No. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Chair. I think the general public, I think the problem here is the general public would see it as petty, sneaky, and maybe a little bit mean as well. And it kind of removes the opportunity for those spontaneous acts of goodwill in our communities, which I think is really, really important at the moment. I think trialling out in one car park, as has just been stated by Councillor Davey, I don't think it would give us the data required. A better idea to find out whether this is quite a potentially large chunk is perhaps to look at other councils to see, there might be many other councils across the country have made this change. And maybe it might be worth having a look at how much extra revenue that has brought them from doing so, because it appears that Andrew Ennis isn't sure. I mean, Andrew Ennis has said that he doesn't think it will make that much, but you know, I think the TAFF should be open to looking into it. I just worry about the reaction from the general public. So I would be minded to be against if I was on the TAFF, which I'm not. But thank you for letting me speak there.
Thank you. Right, is there any other members that want to speak on anything at the moment? No? Right, that I think will almost bring this to an end. We need to get the reports through for the next meeting so that we can discuss things and come up with ideas of moving forward to get this into council with recommendations. Other than that, I don't think there's anything else to follow on with, is there? So we'll meet again on the 20, whatever it is, a week today, 26, that makes it, doesn't it? And come up with our recommendations so we can move forward on this. And other than that, I think we've completed today's task. So I will, I've got my word in here somewhere. This brings the meeting to a close. To an end, I would like to thank everyone, including members of the public, which there was none, and not anyone watching online, for taking part. However, I can just remind you, those present, that and that the supporting officer will confirm when the meeting is no longer being recorded or going live, and until then, your comments will be live to the public.